Welcome back. I need all of you break room bandits to gather around the water cooler because it is time for the water cooler talk post Mexican Grand Prix edition. And this is definitely going to be a race where it's a what could have been. And I'm going to go ahead and let that lead me straight into my first point, in that the FIA made some serious mistakes this weekend, both with the stewarding and the way they decided to handle certain situations, and especially how they decided to handle the end of the race. So let's go ahead and get into that because that's what I've been thinking about the most following the race. The final couple laps, we had Verstappen closing in on Leclerc. Very, very high chance that we were going to get a really good battle for the last two laps. And we also had Oscar Piastri closing in on Oliver Bearman, who was in fourth place. Now, we essentially got robbed of two battles by the FIA because Carlos Sainz decided to lose it in the stadium section after having one of the worst Mexican Grand Prix he probably ever could have imagined for himself. He decides to spin out in the stadium section after already having a drive-through penalty and another 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lanes because something was wrong with his pit speed limiter. I mean, the car was hopping and bouncing. They called it out on the broadcast. He put it out over the radio. Pretty obvious there was an issue. Which is kind of funny, too, that he gets a drive-through penalty when the issue is that he can't maintain the pit lane speed limit. That part was pretty funny. But he ends up losing it in the stadium section, smacking the rear right wheel. What a tongue twister. Smacks that back right wheel off the wall, completely destroys the suspension, but he's able to drive forward into the gap in the wall. And not only was he able to get a majority of the car behind the wall, he didn't get it all the way. I think he was worried about hitting the rear left off the wall, the part of the wall that was open, because the car was crab walking into it, and there was a bunch of stuff, marshals and equipment and stuff back there. So I understand why he didn't pull all the way back in, but if he could have just given us maybe 2-3 more feet, we would have been fine. But he pulls in behind the wall. The car also wasn't in an area where it was very likely that if a car lost control, it was going to hit there. Where he ended up hitting was 20, 30, 40 feet down that wall, which is probably where another car would end up going if something did happen. And the FIA at first threw a local yellow, and it had stayed a local double wave for so long that I was like, okay, they're not going to rob us of these, two battles that are about to take place with Verstappen, Leclerc, and Piastri, Bearman. But after letting, Verstappen and Leclerc kind of initially start to duke it out because Verstappen finally caught him for about 3/4 of the lap, they decide to throw a virtual safety car right as we get to the straight. So immediately part of me was like, okay, well, maybe they'll throw this up, try to get Sainz's car pushed back another, foot or two. But naturally, they couldn't get the car to move because the suspension's fucked. That car's crab walking. It's not something that's going to be easy to push. So we sit under this virtual safety car for so long that it comes down to the final lap, and Verstappen is just sitting right behind Leclerc, just waiting for this virtual safety car to end. They're not moving the car. They can't move the car. Nothing is happening. And they finally decide to raise the virtual safety car after Verstappen has already missed pretty much the only overtaking chance he was going to have. And Oscar also was sitting on the main straight when this happened, and he didn't have enough time to get the move put on Bearman. So Verstappen really only got a turn 4, which they were already on that straight when they decided to lift the virtual. So he really had no chance unless Leclerc just completely bottled it. And the thing is they kept the local yellow even after the virtual safety car because nothing had changed. We sat under virtual safety car for that long for nothing to change. And we ended up running out the last lap anyways. So got completely robbed of what could have been a 10 out of 10 Mexican Grand Prix because it started off absolutely insane. I mean, it was like a Formula One game online lobby at first with people flying across the track. Verstappen almost puts it in the wall. Hamilton gets a 10-second penalty fighting Verstappen and cutting across the track. I mean, the beginning of that race was an absolute 10 out of 10. I mean, if it wasn't one of your favorite drivers that ended up winning out, maybe you think it was like a 6 or a 5 out of 10. It did get a little mid through, the mid-laps as Formula One races do, especially somewhere like Mexico where they're overheating and you got to manage brakes, which we heard a lot from George Russell. We'll get to that later. But the thing is at the end of the race and stealing that grandstand finish from us wasn't the only thing that the FIA fucked up this weekend. There was also some really questionable penalties. A lot of people are kind of arguing about the Hamilton penalty because it's kind of what we seen in Austin last year with Lando and Verstappen, and that Hamilton went off the track and decided to cut the track, but when Verstappen was on the inside and also took the corner, he didn't make the corner. He went off the track as well, which allowed him to start fighting with Russell and things like that. Now, the only reason I kind of assumed that Hamilton was going to get a penalty is because he didn't get pushed off the track. He locked up coming into turn 4, and took himself off. So I think that's the problem, is Hamilton didn't even really get into the corner to get pushed off. So he kind of was always going to happen. I mean, there's only one way to look at that. I do think it's crazy that no one else was looked at. In my opinion, Leclerc also deserved a penalty. I'm glad he didn't get it, but he definitely deserved one after coming into turn one and absolutely, I mean, that's the definition of gaining an advantage. Hamilton and everyone comes through, and Leclerc has this massive gap already, pulled out like 2-3 seconds on everybody because he decided to cut across the grass. He gave this position back to Lando because he actually came through turn 1 and 2 and 3 and ended up in first. He gave it back to Lando, but then stayed ahead of Lewis, who I don't think he should have, and it sounds like the commentary and a lot of other people agree. But the most egregious mistake made by the FIA this weekend is following the race, a bunch of onboards came out from Liam Lawson, where he comes full speed into turn 1, and there's 2 marshals just standing in the middle of the track in between turn 1 and turn 2. And thankfully, Liam was paying attention, as he would be. And he wasn't absolutely full, push and tilt, because he really wasn't in the race. And I believe he was just coming out of the pits because it looked like he was on some fresh hards. Because he had some issues, ended up in the pits, got a front wing change, things like that, ends up retiring, which I think is why it wasn't talked about as much. But he immediately was on the radio like, what the fuck is going on? The team acknowledged it and, told him good job for avoiding it, because, I mean, that could have been massive, man. I mean, you're sending marshals out on the track when you have Liam Lawson pushing pretty hard out of the pits. I mean, these are the type of things that can't happen. I mean, we've seen stuff in Japan. Obviously, there was a lot of drama that year where they sent the tractor out again on the track, and Pierre Gasly was out there when it's pouring down rain. These type of things are easily avoidable, but at the same time, I understand how they happened. They just can't happen. That's the problem. They just can't happen. We seen when they threw up the local yellows in turn 1, when my wife and I were watching it, that I was like, okay, must be some debris or something out there. Commentary said the same thing. And I could see that Liam was down in that area, and I'm like, okay, well, they'll have a nice gap once Liam goes through, that before Lando and Leclerc and everyone gets there, who are currently in the stadium section, they'll have a decent little gap to run out there, get whatever it is, and get back to the wall. But apparently they just either forgot about Liam, or maybe thought Liam was, already retiring in the pits before that or something. I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, if we can see it at home, they have to be able to see it on the track, right? Somebody has to be watching this if the people at home are able to see it. That's kind of my point. The FIA made some huge mistakes this weekend. Next, I want to talk about the George Russell and the whole Mercedes thing with trying to get Antonelli out of the way. George Russell is one of the most likable, but also one of the most hateable drivers in Formula One. I do root for George Russell a lot. I love that he's constantly in the fight for podiums and wins, especially this season. I feel like he's really starting to take himself, or take control of Mercedes a little bit. Well, what little bit of control they'll let him take. I do also have a feeling that, in my opinion, George Russell is one of the most disrespected drivers in Formula One, because he was Mercedes' golden boy for so long, coming through the junior ranks and coming into Williams. Everybody was just waiting for him to get a crack at the Mercedes. He finally gets there, and not only does he get there, he beats Lewis Hamilton, and then Hamilton leaves to go to Ferrari, and he gets a young gun, Kimi Antonelli, next to him. This is the moment where George Russell clearly knows, like, hey, this is my team. I'm taking over. I'm the new Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, right, buddy. Mercedes is not giving him that kind of treatment. Making contract talks extremely difficult, trying not to give him a long-term contract, which it sounds like he did get a long-term, thankfully for him. But it's almost like they just refuse to make him the number one driver that he wants to be, and I think that he expects to be. And to be honest, he kind of deserves it. I would say he deserves it. I mean, the team put that much faith into him. He finally got there. I think he's doing a great job controlling the team and being a number one driver. But Mercedes aren't really backing him that way. Really just, he's behind Kimi Antonelli. Definitely had more pace. I do agree that him getting on the radio and constantly asking for Antonelli to move out of the way every single race weekend is getting a little bit annoying. And then he constantly cries on the radio the entire time. That shit does get really, really annoying. But I kind of understand it, because, like I said, he's got to feel disrespected, because, in my opinion, he's one of the most disrespected drivers in Formula One. His skill is definitely there, but Mercedes just will not let him act and be a number one driver for a top team. And it's going to be really telling coming into next season, because a lot of people think that they're going to nail these new regulations, and especially with the new engine coming into Formula One. I mean, that's where Mercedes already have a proven track record of success. So if they're able to hit the ground running next year and George Russell isn't given the keys to really take over if he's able to, it could definitely get a little spicy, because George was pretty vocal this week here in Mexico. And I mean, things like that only get worse, especially now that you have given him that long-term contract. He's going to try to make that position his and make that number one spot, undisputable amongst the fans and amongst Formula One. That way Mercedes are kind of forced into giving him that kind of respect. So it could definitely get dicey here for even the rest of the season, but definitely coming into next year. But I think it is a really, really big talking point that is going to be, fleshed out over the next few seasons, because I have a feeling those two, unless Max Verstappen or some big, top driver decides to jump ship to Mercedes, it's going to be this driver lineup for probably the next 2, 3, maybe 4 years. So it's pretty interesting to see where this could go. My final talking point is probably going to have to be Ollie Bearman. Myself and a lot of people were starting to notice how inconsistent Ollie's been throughout the season, how he's kind of been a menace on track, and he's always involved in these little incidents. And the main one last week the main one in the last race in Austin was that, he tried to send that audacious move on Yuki Tsunoda that was never on, and decided to, go crazy on the radio and talk crazy in the post race, which was super uncalled for. Like I said in the last video, this was a move that was never on, and Bearman was looking a lot like a menace. But then he shows up in Mexico, starts in P9, and ends up with his best finish, and I think ties Haas's best finish of a P4. I really thought that a podium was looking on for him, and I think that the podium definitely was in the cards if they just didn't take that second pit stop. Unfortunately, hindsight is 2020. It is what it is. But Ollie Bearman definitely made his mark on Formula One now, and I don't think that one performance should necessarily, cement your future in Formula One, especially when it's only your first year and this was such a ridiculous race in the first couple laps. But for a rookie that is kind of, like I said, been a menace, and those conversations were finally starting about him being inconsistent and being, reckless on track and always getting involved in incidents, not just with other drivers, but including his own teammate. So I think this kind of clears the air a little bit. He has some penalty points falling off in Brazil, because last year was really rough for him there. So he's got some penalty points falling off. So I think that conversation won't really be brought up unless he has a really bad and menacing 4 races, which it's Bearman. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. Like I said, those conversations were starting about how inconsistent he can be. So let's see if he's able to get a little bit of form and finish off this season strong and come into these new regulations with Haas and try to have a little bit of success, because this is definitely going to be something that people are going to remember going into the offseason, especially if he's able to keep it up throughout the rest of the year and maybe to stay in the points or the fringe of the points. I don't think he needs to do another heroic drive like this to look good at the end of the season. It would definitely help, of course, but I think that this was enough to, kind of refresh people's minds on what Ollie Bearman is there for, why he's in Formula One, how good he is and how good he can be. And I think coming into the end of the season, he's definitely he's not one of the rookies that people will say is a flop. If any of the rookies can really be said to be flops, I think Antonelli probably will still get the most heat at the end of the season, even though I feel like it's the most undeserving of the rookies to get any heat. But, it is what it is. Formula One fans are fickle. Formula One teams can be fickle as well. I think that a lot of the rookies have done really well this season, and this is a huge up for Ollie Bearman and a really, really big up for Haas, because they have some pretty solid drivers. And so if Haas are somehow able to nail the new regulations coming into next season, hey, you guys have some talent in the car, just like a lot of the other teams, but Bearman proved that he can, compete with the top guys if you give him a car good enough. But I think that is going to do it for the water cooler talk this week, post-Mexican Grand Prix. If there's anything you guys think I missed, leave a comment down below. I would love to have a conversation about it. I'm really looking forward to Brazil. This championship fight is absolutely heating up. I guess I should also mention that Lando Norris took control of the Drivers' Championship because Oscar wasn't able to put a move on Bearman with that virtual safety car. So Lando now leads the championship by only 2 points. It really comes down to who's going to finish off the season the best. It probably won't be Oscar, unfortunately, but thankfully Qatar and Abu Dhabi are pretty good tracks for him. Qatar especially is a really good track for Oscar. So we'll have to see how it goes. Unfortunately, all it takes is one mistake in Brazil, which is a sprint weekend, or Las Vegas, where Oscar doesn't really seem to be the strongest, but Lando also isn't the strongest at these races. So, hey, it could be a cracker to the end of the season. Anyways, I will see you guys at the water cooler before the Brazilian Grand Prix. I hope you guys enjoy your work week, and yeah, I'll see you then.